Hey guys, alright, second try doing this video. The first time I was capturing the window and it didn't show any of the menus. So I wanted to do a quick video about how I set up my friend's car to get started. He recently got a Haltech ECU because he was having problems with the wiring harness in a stock one, and just they were tired of messing with all the old wiring and splices and loose pins and stuff. So they, at the shootout, they bought a flying lead, I believe it's called, and the ECU. And I just want to show how we got it started. We didn't actually get it started then. It got mostly wired and then brought home, and then it just kind of sat in the shop for a while. But we recently got it running, and it was actually a lot easier than I thought. And I think that a lot of the credit goes to Haltech for making good base files and, knowing what we need set up in the car. So I'll show you what we found. So normally you would connect the ECU up and it would, show up, you would hit connect and then read and it would pop everything up. But this is the same thing, just reading from a file. So we'll go in here, we'll open up, and I'll pick his oldest map that we have in here. Loads it up. All right, and here's what it looks like. Normally it would go to this screen by default. That's just the last tab it was on. So they had given us a base map and gave us some help setting up a little bit, but pretty much I looked at it and the base map kind of presets a lot of this stuff. So when you get yours first, what you'll want to do is you'll want to go into open, and then this folder is actually provided with the software. So you find your car in here. So in our case, we go Mitsubishi, Eclipse 2G, and then you go down and find the one that best matches what you have. So in our case, it would be, this Nexus S2 Eclipse 2G. So that's what we have in here now. So you'd open that up and it does this. It'll open up to here. This one's, it says Elite, but I mean, it was what they gave us at the time, and I have a newer version of the software than he actually had when we set this up. So when you first get it, what you want to do is you want to go and check and make sure that your configuration here makes sense. So, 2-liter, 4-cylinder, compression ratio. Actually, his is like 8.8, so you just do, 8.8. And then I didn't touch this, and this is obviously correct. So then I believe there's other things. Yeah, so if you go into these, it'll show you what kind of trigger you have. So if you happen to have some other kind of trigger wheel, you would be able to set it in here. These are all the pre-made values, and then here's some generic ones, multi-tooth, and then there's all kinds of settings. So there's other, trigger setups you could have or make depending on your need. But this is all preset. So this is for a car with a stock crank sensor on the 2G. In his case, it's actually a 1G cam sensor that does this, but they work the same way. So this is all preset. We didn't have to mess with any of this stuff, by the way. Like I said, the base map had this preset. Next thing you want to check is in here. And when I had initially checked, I'm not sure if it was just because they were preparing to diagnose, but this was checked. So the car wasn't doing injectors, running injectors at all. But then it had, the settings all set up, and I want to see if it had any of the, let's see. Yeah, it did not. So what I had to do when we first started, it had some kind of weird table setting in there that I didn't understand. And I watched some videos on it, and I found that in our case, it's as easy to set up the injectors as clicking, select stage 1 injectors. And then in here is a predefined list of every, common injector. So all I had to do was he has ID 1000. I just clicked ID 1000 and it changed those automatically. And there you go. Now it's set. I didn't have to change anything else here to get this working. That was all that I did. And here's the other thing. So the nice thing about this too is for any sensor or output or anything, it will actually show you, if you're using their harness, what wires and colors that those, sensors or injectors or, whatever you have wired up are. So like CAN bus, it'll tell you what wire it is, although CAN bus is just blue and white. It'll say the pin location as well. So this is A1, A2, A3, A4. and the actual manual that you get with it. And also, if you just pull it up off of their website, will show you one plug is A, one plug is C, I believe, on this ECU. And I'm sure it's different with slightly different models like the Nexus R versus the S, but it's pretty easy. It'll just tell you, and then you can out over, find your pin, and you'll notice that it matches what they have. That's what we found in our case. And it's pretty cool. It's got, tests so you can test fire, things, make sure that they're working. The next thing checked, and this is another thing I didn't have to mess with. Here's the ignition system, and this is all set by the base map. Let's see what he had. Yeah, there's not even anything really in here. His is set to fire as stock, but I believe is wired as sequential because he has Denso coils. So if you had stock ignition, you would just do that. If you had the Densos, you just have to look up exactly what would be different in your case. Yep, and it's got those settings, and then you can go in here, all your sensors. This is different on his setting, so they had to input the values for the sensor. I believe he has an AEM 5-bar, but you just put in the values for it. Those all work. We didn't have to. It's pretty simple. Like if you have anything you want to adjust, when you get a little more into this, obviously you have every option available to you. And then intake air, just the regular GM1. I mean, I believe that even comes with the ECU in most cases. So that's pretty simple. Coolant temp is just the stock coolant temp, and this is a part of the base table, I believe, as well. So I believe all the Mitsu ones are pretty much the same. And now wideband, now here's a point where you could have it wired differently or not. So say you have an AEM or an Innovate or something, you could use that for this, but it's not recommended because the controller being controlled and have more data that the ECU can see is better in this case than having an analog one like one of those would be. So in his case, he actually connected his existing, sensor that came with his AEM directly to the ECU's harness output for this. So you look in here, it's directly hooked into this. It's assigned incorrectly in here, and I'll get to that in a minute, but here's where it would be connected on the ECU side. So it's can be directly connected. You don't need your gauge. Now, if you want to use the gauge, I mean, you could do that, but just keep in mind it won't be as accurate as having it directly fed off of the ECU itself. So, and that's the next thing I wanted to get to with this is the one thing I noticed was weird is for whatever reason, his ECU had the wideband defined as if it was an external box, like a CAN-driven box, which isn't what he had. It was wired to this. And the O2 control didn't work because of that. So what you have to do in that case, you clear the assignment, and it goes this way. And you go back into assign, and you click on that. Then it sets it back to internal, and then the sensor has to match the type. You just have to look up what the different widebands come with for a sensor. The two that you're probably going to run into are the 4.9 and I believe the 4.2. I don't see the 4.2 in here, but it's probably one of these other ones. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, it was pretty easy. It ran with no issue, and then it read right up here on this output when the car was running. Speed, it's obviously just, this is all predefined as well by the base file. We do not have the speed sensor hooked up right now. It's installed, but that's one thing that we didn't wire. We did get the car started and running without it, but obviously there will be a lot of functions like the two-step and, boost by gear and speed and stuff, and, like time-based things that probably won't work with that because they'll have nothing to go off of. Also, I believe there's some automatic logging that you can run that way. Yeah, but it's all set up. We just got to wire it. Now, the part that, most people are intimidated by is, well, how do you tune the car, once you have it going? Here's all the default settings. He has speed density, like I said, with the map. So once this is set, I believe, yeah, if you had a MAF sensor like stock, you could set that, and then you would be able to run, a stock MAF. So if you had an Evo, DSM, whatever, that wouldn't be too bad. Here's where the settings for the fuel are by default. Here's target airflow, AFR. This is the base map that it came with, and it seems to be pretty well good. We may, I would imagine, richen this up slightly under boost, I'm not sure what his car is exactly happy with. Every engine is kind of a little different. He's on pump gas, so we might want to potentially make this slightly richer in his case. We'll just have to see how the car likes it. And then here's the airflow for the fuel. This we did have to pretty significantly change. Like the car wanted to idle at around, 17 to 1 or something, like 16, 17 to 1 once it was warmed up. But it's pretty easy to do. Once you have O2 control working over here, it'll you can run a trace. So you hit the T key, it'll put a cross on here like here, and then kind of highlight and learn off of cells, and they'll change color as it goes. And then once you do that, you can hit Q, it'll adjust them, and then you undo your trace and it'll show the values that have changed, and you can kind of, select these here and smooth them out. Like linear lines will, smooth them based off of what you from here to here, essentially is how it works. So it works pretty well. That's all that I really had. I made a little bit of adjustments. Like we drove around the block for, 20 minutes. And we got it running and driving, idling, everything worked all right. And I just had to do a couple adjustments with that. And then it'll show the amount it's adjusting over here. And then here's the other thing that would be kind of relevant to this is O2 control. Now this is what I had the big problem getting working, is I could not get it to flip. It would say sensor error. And I couldn't figure, and also it was throwing a code, and the code might be stored up here. Let me see. Let's see. No, that's just the check engine light isn't hooked up, but it's because he has no cluster. It would throw a code when the car started for the O2 input being shut off. And what I had found after a lot of digging and looking around was down here, it had this shown, for a wideband box, but he doesn't have a wideband box. And the other place that this showed up, and I was hesitant to mess with it at first because I just didn't know, I'm new to this platform, was it showed a wideband under here. Yeah. So this was enabled right here as well. And I'm like, well, but he doesn't have this WBC1. So what I did was I unchecked it. It then disappeared out of here. And the combination of doing that, as well as up here under wideband, where the wiring is, I made sure this assignment only showed the internal. And then once I did that, the O2 control said running, and then it started adjusting, and you would see it trims in here, and it would show you the difference, and everything started working like it was supposed to. But that's what you need. You need O2 control to work in order to use this quick tune button here, as this little tooltip says, and you can pause it and read this if you'd like. If you don't have this installed already, you want to check it out. But yeah, once you get that working, it'll run that perfectly. And that's exactly what we did. Like literally, when we got this plugged in, we cranked with the injectors disabled, confirmed that they were indeed, we were getting RPM and everything. The other thing we actually did, and let me see if I can find the spot in here for it. Let me find it in here. I'm trying to find the fuel pump setting, because this was another thing that kind of confused me at first. Yeah, here we go. So I'm used to ECM Link, where there is just a fuel pump on checkbox, and this doesn't really have that. But what you can do is when you're in fuel pump here, if you just change the active state of the relay to be high instead of low, then when the car is just sitting stationary with the key on, it'll turn on for you. So if you got to set your base fuel pressure, all you got to do is just key on, ECU boots, flip this over to high, and it'll immediately start, the fuel pump on for you. And that's how I like to set the base fuel pressure. If you have it on a charger, that's probably a little better as well. But that's how I do it. And then when you're done, just put it back to low. And that's all I had to do to get it set up. And also I double checked and made sure that all these fan outputs and stuff were set. And I think the other thing I adjusted, yes, the other thing that I did adjust once we got the car driving was I noticed it was kind of bucking and tending to freak out a little bit with O2 control. And I think that part of this is because he doesn't have an idle air control valve right now. So it seems to have trouble adjusting that. We might need to give it more throttle blade. I'm just not really familiar with a car that has no idle air control like that. It's a manual, so it's a little bit better, you know, would be able to deal with it. But what I did end up changing to kind of help the car run a little better was I just set this minimum RPM for O2 control to like 0. It made the bucking pretty much stop, because I think what was happening was it was unable to run any O2 control when the car is like, you know, you're getting on clutch engagement and the RPM drops a little low. So I think it was dropping below it and not able to compensate. That may be the case, you know, like I said, I'm new to this, that we can turn this back up once it's been tuned there, but I'm just not 100% sure. For now, we just have this on 0 and it ran much better. But yeah, I don't believe we actually, once I got that running, the car started. You know, all I did is turn the injectors on, got the O2 sensor, you know, shut off down here, this external box, and that pin assignment under here, had that correct. Then it started to ran, O2 control worked. We had, you know, compensation off the wideband, everything worked. The only thing that we have yet as of this video to get working is he has a CAN dash, like a race pack. And we had it configured, but I believe the mistake that I made was when I was looking at the manual for his ECU, it had one terminated CAN bus already with the Deutsch plug on it. And we plugged that in, plugged that in, had that set up. It powers on and detects voltage, so we know that that's right. But what I didn't know at the time was vehicle CAN was assigned to one of them, and there are actually 2. So CAN 1 and CAN 2. I didn't even notice that when I was in here. So I believe what we did is we have it probably on CAN 1 instead of CAN 2. All that I would need to do to fix that is disable vehicle CAN here, because he doesn't have it. It's a, you know, DSM. There's nothing else that runs CAN on that. There is no CAN, and there isn't even OBD anymore because there's no stock anything. So all I need to do is shut that off and then come in here and just make sure that the CAN port for the Haltech CAN is assigned to the correct one, either 1 or 2. So like we just had to figure out which one we had it in and then fix that. And I bet it'll start working. So hopefully I can do that. And I'll try to post a short or something of, you know, how we have it set up. The wiring is really rough, but you know, we do plan on cleaning that up. I'm just trying to learn how to get this working, because I find it really interesting and I like learning about this stuff. I'll try to make more videos about this as I learn about it. That's about all that I have right now. I would like to make more once I learn a little bit more about it. And hopefully I can, you know, get some more experience with this, particularly on like a automatic car like mine. That's the plan, at least. So yeah, if anybody has any questions or, you know, suggestions of things to check, or, you know, they'd like to see, let me know. Oh, and the other big thing I really like about this before I go, the ECU can be powered by your laptop. So the car doesn't need to be on or even have power for it to work. You can just plug the USB in and it works. So you can make changes with the car keyed off. It's very awesome. All right. Thanks a lot. And look forward to making another video soon. Thanks.